Welcome to our Supplier Staging webinar. Today we're going to go into the importance of your suppliers in the digital supply chain and how Jovix fits from both a software and hardware perspective into the supplier engagement process. My name is Justin Mills, and I am the Vice President of Product Management at Atlas. I've been with the company for 8 years now. Deployed quite a few projects all across the globe and have had the opportunity to work not only in our customer success departments, but also now I've spent some time in the product management side. I'm joined by Brad Gannaway, one of our project managers, who has a background in project and supply chain management. And through his 5 years here at Atlas, he's implemented quite a few projects as well, and picked up quite a few skills as far as process analysis and optimizations when introducing this technology to the different projects our clients have. Before we go into the details of the webinar, I just want to take some quick time to go over a safety moment. It's flu season here in North America, and some things you can do to minimize the spread of the flu are to regularly replace your PPE on job sites and properly clean your reusable equipment that might be shared. Try to wash your hands and avoid touching your eyes, nose, or mouth as often as possible. And if you can, if you're sick and you know you have group meetings planned for the day, there's remote technology that allows you to meet outside of the meeting room and not expose others. And then lastly, there's preventative measures through things like the flu shot. Always recommend getting those to help minimize your chances. So real quick, I want to go through the agenda. First, we want to give a general overview of Atlas RFID Solutions, our company, and then Jovix, the product. Once we've established that, we've got some time planned to define supplier engagement as we see it. And then once we have an understanding of supplier engagement, want to dive into configurable supplier workflows in the product. So we'll walk through what those configurable workflows are, then have some videos of the product that show it in action. Once we've seen that, Brad and I will have an industry discussion on how that's used and applied in the field. And from there, we'll wrap up and go into our next steps. So I guess first off, who is Atlas RFID? We're a company. We were founded in 2007, and we were primarily a software company. We're located here in Birmingham, Alabama, but have employees all over the world serving many different industries and clients in industrial construction. And we really consider ourselves construction-centric. We're built from the boots back. So a lot of the feedback that we get from the field, that we get from our customer success team, we try to build that into our product and ultimately deliver a better experience. And we do that through our product Jovix, and it stands for Job Site Visibility Extension. And Jovix is really a tool for the job site to help deliver material readiness to your projects. And we consider material readiness a key component of construction that allows your teams to maintain construction schedules and ultimately keep a productive workforce. So a lot of your engineering tools upstream happen in the virtual world. We have quite sophisticated tools to help design these sophisticated plants. And that generates tons of data, and a part of that data set are materials. And that's really where we come into play. We focus specifically on materials in these projects. And as the project is kicked off and we have all these drawings and designs to build a plant, we have to understand how those materials are going to be procured, fabricated, and delivered to a job site. And that's really where we pick up some of our initial data feeds is at that upfront design. And Jovix comes into play in tracking the fabrication or the just fulfillment of those materials. And oftentimes that starts at the supplier. Our goal is to take that digital information and tie it to the physical world of the material and use auto ID and software components to help track that process. So when you build a plant, there's tons and thousands, hundreds of thousands of unique items and also bulk items that have to come together in a plan to build these different systems and build a capital project. So a lot of times out in the field, you will see paper and clipboard tracking these materials. As a truck comes through the gate, someone's going to come up and take a document package from that delivery and have to compare those materials on the truck to what's listed on paper. Construction crews who need materials to complete their work will often have to write down on a piece of paper what type of material they need, submit it to their materials group so that they can get it out of the warehouse or the laydown yard to start their work on time. So paper just naturally is error prone. You have to, one, write legibly, and two, being able to understand what's written on that paper. And
because all of us in the construction industry have great penmanship.
Yeah, that's right. Fantastic. And it is really, really easy to read.
Yeah, exactly.
And then a lot of time that paper gets consolidated into binders or to inboxes and outboxes, and it sits and it waits. It's in a job site trailer just waiting to be processed. And that creates a lag in your data and ultimately a lag in fulfilling some of these material requests. So our goal is to take that information and digitize it. And that really starts upstream with your suppliers, but carries all the way through the receipt, the storage, and then the issuance of those materials. So in Jovix, on the software side, we have several components. One is the track and trace component, and that's really managing the status and location of materials through your supply chain. So anytime we're interacting with a material or some form of auto ID, which could be a barcode, a passive RFID tag, or an active RFID tag, we're capturing the material's location, whether it be through GPS or some type of designated location, all in a mobile device. And we're able to track that across the globe and understand where that material relates to the construction schedule. So to do that, we have a couple different types of devices. One is just a consumer cell phone. So just on my personal device, I'm able to log into Jovix, access a material record, and adjust its status location or find it somewhere in the world using a map and RFID. The application is available for Android and iOS, and outside of consumer devices, we have more specialized or ruggedized devices, and this is an example of a mobile demand Android device in a smaller form factor than some of the larger tablets, but a bit larger than your consumer device. And some benefits of this are that it comes with certain types of ergonomic accessories. So this hand strap allows me to walk around much easier and keep it on my person out in the field. It also comes with a ruggedized case built into it. This particular model also has an integrated barcode imager. So rather than relying on the device's camera, I can use this specialized barcode imager to scan barcode and RFID tags at a pretty rapid rate.
Which is huge at a supplier that's tagging and associating thousands of materials. If they're just able to have it just ergonomically, that's so much easier just to walk up and scan like this instead of having to hold this and try to get the camera to use it or to use an external one. This option is awesome for particular situations. You know, if you're receiving, you might want to use the TSL, right? Because it would be easier like this, and you've got maybe a bigger tablet, but for those quick ones, oh look, TSL.
Yeah, Brad mentioned the TSL. This is a Bluetooth peripheral that will connect with my phone, a rugged device, and it has two functions. One is it's also a barcode imager, a lot like the one that is integrated into this device, so you can scan barcodes. But this is also a passive RFID reader and antenna, and it allows you to interact with different passive RFID tags in the environment for the association or just for the location finding, being able to hone in on a single one, or sweeping multiple tags to update their locations. And in a minute, Brad will go through some of the different RFID types and tags and what those mean. But just to continue down the hardware line, we talked about the smaller form factor. This is typically something that you deploy to suppliers or fabricators or users who are doing pretty repetitive tasks that are relatively simple. But we have several options. One is this Zebra Android tablet. It also has an integrated barcode scanner up in the handle. But the first thing you'll notice is that it's quite a bit larger. There's some benefit to that. One is you get a lot more real estate on your screen that allow you to do things like complex inspections. So if I'm not just associating thousands of RFID tags and I want to log in and inspect a certain material, from there, I would have more room to see a list of very detailed engineering inspection questions that require me to write comments and notes. Another benefit, if I'm viewing material cut sheets or any type of drawing on this device, I've got much more room on this screen to zoom in and out and see what's part of that particular attachment. But both devices are very rugged. We go through a pretty robust testing and approval cycle here in our headquarters to make sure that these are going to stand up to industrial construction projects, falling off of Kubotas, being left outside, rained on. We know it's not the easiest environment to deploy some technology, but all of these pass our initial tests. Last thing to note that both connect via Wi-Fi and also have the option to have integrated cellular connections through the addition of a SIM card. So I talked about track and trace and briefly talked about inspections when we were detailing the form factor of the larger tablet. Really the middle ground from the software perspective are transactional functions, so things like material receipts, pick lists, issues. So these are really tracking care, custody, and control points in the materials management lifecycle. So we extend those functions to the field through the mobile devices. So now that we've talked about the software and how that can run on different devices, I think it'd be a good idea to run through the different types of auto ID and how we use those.
So we've got several different ways that we can auto ID a material. And we use auto ID because auto ID kind of encompasses both RFID and barcode labeling. So it automatically IDs something. We start out with the high end, which are our active tags. They will send out a signal, broadcast a signal, read up to about 200 meters. And so use these on some things that are high dollar items that you want some very accurate tracking on. So then next step down, we go down to passive tags, right? So these have to be energized by the antenna that's reading. A little bit shorter read range, but these are the most economical ones. We have those in different types. We would use this for maybe small bore pipe spools because wrapping this around a hang tag around that might not read well. So we usually recommend these for the small bore pipe spools. And then same technology, a passive tag and a hang tag, like I mentioned. It's got the antenna embedded in a strip. You've probably seen these in different applications around just everyday life, but they come with a barcode, and we use these I'd like to put these on everything. But we use these for bulk materials. We use them for large pipe spools. We use them for instrumentation, mechanical. Put these on there. It just depends on what your tagging strategy is. So there are a lot of applications, and then we have just regular barcode labels that everybody's accustomed to, that we can use those for contained items to tell what's inside of a container. So
speaking of that, you mentioned a tagging strategy. Mm-hmm. One of our best practices is to sit down with our projects and clients, review their bill of materials and understand how critical those materials are for construction, the shape, the size, the supplier that's going to provide them, and by material type, we'll go through and determine the best type of auto ID that we'd like to apply and get the most benefit out of. So it's not, sometimes it's a one size fits all. We have some projects who want to benefit from using just one type of tag, and we've seen them deploy the passive hang tags across pretty much all of their materials. Other cases, we recommend a blend of barcode and different passive tags are active to really track what matters to you and what's going to provide the most value to the project. But we deploy those different types to really help with identification in our mobile application, whether that's scanning a barcode or interfacing with RFID. But then also to interact with it through our autonomous readers. So we have 3 different types. We have a gate reader. That's a fixed reader that we normally install at a choke point. So whether it's the entrance to your job site, the exit of a fabrication facility, or a laydown yard, it tracks movement between that or through that threshold, and we can update the status and location of those materials based on those reads. We can also apply automated rules to change the status of those materials based on that choke point and what's happening. The 2 other types are our vehicle-mounted reader and our drone-mounted reader, and they both solve the same problem or provide the same value, and that's updating the location of your materials on a job site by either interfacing with the active or passive RFID tags that are deployed. So either the drone flies around autonomously, or we equip a vehicle with some antennae and a processing unit on board, and it reads all the tags out in the environment, collects GPS data and tag data, and ultimately sends it back to the web application to update material locations if they've moved, or to let you know that they've stayed in the same place, which gives you really good visibility into your inventory where it is.
And just like the tagging strategy, we do a hardware strategy as well. I mean, that goes along with your tagging strategy. So we wouldn't recommend a gate reader for something that the drone is going to cover everything. You don't have any choke points. You have multiple entrances, unless it might make more sense just to get your locations from the drone, or exactly the opposite. Maybe you only have one entrance, one exit, one gate reader, and you're only doing 2,000 pipe spools for that one project. That's all you're doing. You might only need a gate reader to do that.
That's right. And the drone and the vehicle mounted readers aren't required to keep your locations up to date. You can perform those same sweeps with something like this TSL and a phone or tablet to go out and collect location data. But I think that gives a good overview of the auto ID hardware and readers that we deploy. So with that, maybe Brad, you can give us a quick overview of our kind of deployment process for professional services.
So in our Jovix Professional Services, we have several teams that help us implement the software on each one of the projects, depending on what type of project it is. We've been deployed across 6 continents around the world, 24 countries, 70 plus projects, 600 sites. I mean, it is ridiculous how many sites we've been, because we include those. And so the suppliers that we've been to is something that we've been doing for the last several years and really focusing on that. And 350 plus suppliers, that's a little low now. We're above 350. It's 350 plus, but we're 100 past that now.
And that number's growing fast.
Yeah, it is. And in fact, I'm going to Peru next week, and I'll be visiting one of the suppliers down in Peru. So we have different tiers of support that we do. Tier 1 support is we provide with the implementation team. We have digital supply chain coordinators that come in. We have data managers that work. It just depends on how the project is scheduled, the contract. And we build work instructions. We do guided tutorials. We build customized classes for that project. And that's where you get to the tier 2 level stuff is we have a Jovix project manager. You get Jovix data management team more involved in that. And then you have the Jovix integration services team, which is, we have a great integration team that has done some amazing things over the years. But that is a huge benefit when we're able to tie into upstream client software, whether it's purchasing software or construction software. that integration team works really closely with those and turns out some phenomenal results for the operations. And then at our tier 3, we got tech support. They're available 24/7. We have a global help desk. Those guys do a phenomenal job. Also, they're Jovix experts. When you give them a problem, they run it down. That means you've probably made it past the guys that are working with you directly, the project manager, the digital supply chain coordinators. And so we have this extra set of help available that can back all the guys up that are on site.
Thanks. So we've talked a lot about the software and the hardware in general. So I want to kind of bring it back into specifically the supplier staging side of things. And with that, first I want to define what is supplier engagement, how do we view it, and really how do we deploy it and manage it for our clients. So when we talk about supplier engagement, the first step is for us to really identify the different suppliers in your supply chain for your project that we're going to onboard. And we'll talk more specifically about the onboarding process, but once we know the suppliers and the materials that we want to engage, and we want to have these tags applied upstream so we can get better visibility into it. We create that plan and that list and associate the different types of tags that they will be attaching and associating to their materials. And from there, you've got a pretty good idea of their scope of work and what they're going to be doing in the software and with the tags. It's really important, we've seen at that point, to nail down some contract language so that hopefully we're early enough in a project, we can include that contract language in those purchase orders so the suppliers know that it's coming and it's not an unexpected change.
I even set that as, in some of the projects, as a very defined and called out milestone of ensuring, once we have the contract, we're good to go. When we're that early in a project, it's something that I want to know that is going out, because we have projects that we get on that they've only cut 20% of their POs. And so you've got another 80%. And if that language is not in the contract, it has caused some very tense discussions, but it makes it so much easier and streamlined when everybody's on the same page. It's in the contract. And that's probably my most, I put that as the highest importance of the points that you've got here, because without that, it's really difficult to get things going.
Difficult. We can do it. It's been done.
Oh, 100%.
It makes it a lot easier, to your point. So we've identified the suppliers. We know who we're engaging. We know their scope of work from a tag and a software perspective, and they've got that contract language in their documents. And from there, really starts that onboarding process. And Brad, this is something you have a good amount of experience with, and maybe you can share some of that experience and what that onboarding process looks like.
It's with our training that we do. We start out very early. We want to get in touch with the suppliers early. They request a training straight through one of our custom forms that we've built, linked directly to it, and everything from there is tracked in the same online management system that we have. And then you go to get into the training, and we've built custom classes for each one of those projects in our online learning system, which we call Jovix Train Station. And as you'll see an example, you get training that's specifically for the mobile app, some that's specifically for the web app, hardware training for each one of the readers that we have. And then again, like I said, we'll have some regular classes to teach how to log in, how to go across the workspaces in general, and then each one of the projects get their own custom set, because like we have talked about and will continue is the configuration of Jovix and being able to customize how you do things for your specific project so that you get the benefits that you need.
Thanks. So now that the supplier is engaged, they've had an opportunity to run through these learning plans, as we call them in the learning management system. They're proficient in the software and how they attach those tags and interact with the data. First and foremost, in the product and in the mobile application or web application, if we have a supplier logging into the system, they only see the data that they're supposed to see. So we control that through permissions and group data filters so that you've got this mega project with hundreds of suppliers and a lot of information in it. We're able to dial down those permissions and that data set to only things relevant to that supplier, and they don't see anything they're not supposed to. From there, they are introduced to their purchase order, so their agreement with you. They can see that purchase order information as far as a line perspective, quantities, and delivery schedules. And they're taking that and they're really bringing it to reality as they're about to ship out these materials. So they're looking at purchase order information, and then they are applying and associating RFID tags, barcodes. They can capture pictures, changing the status, capturing reference data like a serial number or a heat number for certain material types. And then we also allow for suppliers to build containers of these materials as they ship them out. So this is really representing reality that I'm not just receiving a lot of materials, I'm receiving these gaskets that's in a crate, these pieces of pipe that are on a skid that's all packaged into a sea container. So that's what's available, and that's the software that we offer in the mobile application, and we'll show a little bit later on how we can configure that into different workflows. But understanding the engagement and the different functionality in software, we do this because you're really allowing the supplier to provide you real-time material updates. So as they're packaging it, as it's coming off the line, whatever it may be, they're working in the system and you can see this progress. Previously, you would rely on an expediter to stay in contact with that supplier, and they may or may not have the best information at the time. Here you can see when they pull it off the shelf, put it in the package, put an RFID tag on it, you've got that update immediately.
Yeah, the idea that we start tracking material when it actually exists is probably one of my favorite mindsets that we've adopted. Is when it's just a PO item, it's just a PO item. It's in the catalog. It doesn't really exist, but once fabrication's done, you put an RFID tag on it. You know that's a piece of material in physical existence, and the benefit, that's where you get the earliest point of auto identification application. Gives us so much more information than we've ever had in this industry. I mean, accurate information at that. We've attempted to do it, but this really is a game changer for suppliers and downstream on-site asset planning and all the way to construction.
Absolutely. So with that information, having it much earlier, that extends the decision horizon for our construction teams. So they can now look at their work package start dates and compare it to their estimated delivery dates of these materials with greater certainty, and understand if they need to make a change in their construction plan or if they're going to be on time. But so this supplier engagement really enables the digital supply chain, giving us those benefits. And across the line, it also seeks to improve data consistency and integrity. So not just getting this information earlier, but making sure it's the right information and tying it back to your purchasing and construction data. So rather than having to look at a packing list that has only supplier terminology on it and relating it back to your system, we're starting up there where they make that connection for us, and it's much more consistent and we can rely upon it. So with that, we want to dive deeper into configurable supplier workflows and want to talk briefly about why configurability. We've been doing this for a while now, 10 plus years working with these large mega projects. And we've learned quite a bit in that time, and we've seen that organizations often operate and label things differently. And sometimes within an organization, projects often operate and label differently.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
We want to remain flexible and be able to conform to your nomenclature and also line up well with systems that we integrate with. But also another benefit is through training and adoption. So if we have our own Jovix terminology and we're trying to marry up with your in-house or ERP system terminology, you have to build a cheat sheet in your head, some kind of matching to know that a shipment is actually an advanced shipping notice or a shipping release. So being configurable and being able to change that allows it to line up, and it's a much easier training process. And then also you can account for the unknown. So if, we often deploy and you don't always get everything right out of the gate. And if you're configurable and flexible with the software and the product, you can make changes down the road that don't require a lot of development time, that can often be.
That don't require any development time. As I just found out, we were implementing a project in the process, and the client came back to me and said, "Hey, Brad, there's no way for me to see relationships in the software." So I called up the configuration gurus and I said, "Hey, how do we get relationships in here?" And I don't know, it was within the next 5 minutes as I was standing there watching him configure the software, boom, there they were. They could see the relationships. We got the pick. They wanted to see them on the purchase order entity. And so we showed the client and they said, "We love that. Let's see it on this entity and this entity." And I said, "Okay." It was simple. Just being able to show the client exactly what they need that quickly. Because most software companies can't do that.
Yeah.
They're going to have to go and do 2, 3, 8 weeks worth of development to get there. That's one of my most excited things to see as we grow as a company is the configurability of the software and what it does for the client.
Good. So just that configurability right now, we manage. It's something that we can do in-house and in conjunction with our customer success team and clients. And that really applies to the different entities in our software. Some examples of those could be your catalog, your materials, your drawings, your shipments, purchase orders, things of that nature. And then the relationships of those, like you were discussing, how material might relate to a purchase order or drawing and where you display that information. And then just kind of at a granular level, the different data fields on each of those entities. And we've seen that being able to configure in this manner allows it to hone in and only show data that's important to the project.
Again, there's some materials that the configurability is that only some materials are going to need the heat code recorded on there.
Right.
I don't have to record a heat code for an electrical component because it didn't get poured of molten metal, right? So I don't need to show a blank heat code number there. And that's another exciting thing about the configurability that we're growing into.
And then lastly, certainly not least, are the workflows like supplier staging and receiving, being able to determine the sequence of that workflow, the data that's captured in it, whether or not you associate a tag. And I think it's about time we finally get to it. So if we're looking at supplier staging specifically, I'm using a term here called building blocks. And when we think of configurability, these building blocks are the configurable portion. You can determine the sequence that they are presented to a user, and then we're growing constantly our library of blocks. So anytime we introduce something, it then becomes a block that can be used in the future. But I've got some slides here that are going to walk through the software through different screenshots. And we're going to go look at a comprehensive supplier staging workflow. So this includes all of the different building blocks that you might see on a supplier side today. It asks that we go through this with the understanding that it could be rearranged or trimmed down, and we'll certainly talk about those different points. So first thing we're going to do is access the supplier staging workflow. We talked about a supplier only seeing their relevant data, and specifically suppliers really just look at purchase order data. They might be assisted by some shipment information, but they're going in to look at their purchase order data and stage material based off of that. So a user is able to go and start typing and see purchase orders related to that to the supplier, and they can select the purchase order they're working off of. And from there, once it's selected on the left, they are presented a list of the different items on that purchase order, and it's giving them the PO line number, the quantity, description, things of that nature. A user can then type in and narrow that list down to the material that's in front of them and what they want to stage. Or they could scan a barcode, and if they had a supplier's barcode on it prior, it'd be a lot faster to identify it using that barcode. It's just a matter of getting that.
And that's been another huge thing that we've learned and implemented on some of these large projects, because like you said, each supplier is going to track and barcode things differently if they do barcode. But it's been a game changer, again, to be able to import the supplier's barcode information and then be able, at this step, just scan, and then pulls it up immediately without having to search.
We'll often say scan, scan, scan. So anytime we can have a user scanning opposed to typing, we try to make that a possibility and a reality. But once they've identified their specific material, it'll give them confirmation that that's the one they're working with. And from there, they can move into the more granular pieces of the workflow. So the first thing that they're going to do on the left is verify the quantity of the material that they're staging. So whether it's a bulk material or something unique, they're taking the quantity that they're physically packing and that they're about to stage. And here we have just right now serial and heat number displayed, but this again is configurable if you want to capture a lot number or some other piece of data related to it. We can build that into the workflow. And then they have the option to select a status. Right now we're going to in transit by default, and we're capturing a GPS location you see in the second screen. So this could either be a location selection in the mobile application and say, hey, I'm staging this at Bay 2 at Fabricator X, or you can go in and save a GPS location of wherever they are in the world. And then once that's complete, the next step in this more comprehensive flow is to take a picture of the material. So it allows you to see how it was packed. And then after the picture's taken, we have the RFID tag association portion. So that would be taking a tag like this hang tag, physically attaching it to the material, and then scanning the barcode on it to capture that data. Then once it's tagged, and we're going to place it into a container, whether that's a crate or a seed can, you can then capture the information of that container and know how it's packed.
Or put a container inside of a container.
That's right. We can also nest containers. So the more sophisticated shipments you might be seeing coming from a sea vessel that has, there might be one container itself, and then having multiple sea cans within that and multiple containers within that, we can build that nested structure. And then with each item, we offer the ability to also print barcode labels from a Bluetooth hip printer. So any of the devices that we looked at, you can print out a 4x2 adhesive label and then put it on if you'd like more consistency for all of your materials, or in some cases we can still leverage that supplier one if we'd rather just do that.
Sure.
And then at the end, you can confirm your work and loop through this workflow basically. So a lot of times they're doing more than one material at a time and allow them to go through and complete it. So that's really the comprehensive view of everything. And I have a video here that I would like to show and walk through of all of that functionality in action. So this will be basically all the blocks we saw strung together in real time. So I think it's around a minute, but we'll see a user here. This is currently on an iPhone, but it's the same for Android. They've accessed Supplier Staging. They've identified their purchase order. This particular purchase order has 2 items on it. They filter down to their first item, verify that it is line number 1. Here we've defaulted to the total quantity of 250, but we're not shipping all of it at this time. Let's say we're just shipping one of the 250 valves. I'm going to capture a serial number for that valve, a heat number, select a status of in transit, and then capture a GPS location of where this device is. Here I'm going to take a photo. This is taking a photo of that material, and we'll capture one real quick of the RFID tag on a laptop. Now that photo is going to be captured and uploaded against that material record in the system, so anyone in the web app can go access it. Now I go in and I scan the barcode on my RFID tag that's associated, select a container, and then print off a barcode label. Now that that's done, click Finish. Successfully staged a material with Supplier Staging workflow.
And everybody can see it.
Everybody can see it, and that's our next video. I'm going to switch to the web application side. And here, so we just looked at the mobile application running in iOS. Here is the web application running in just a web browser on a laptop or desktop or tablet. And on the left-hand side, we see our navigation tree and our project. We're going to dive into the materials grid and find that material we just staged. So I'm filtering in my grid, and I see that particular column, 16C1. I see the quantity of 1, see it's given a location of Atlanta, where that location was taken. And just like those relationships, we saw the related purchase order item down at the bottom. Attachments, I can go in and open up the picture that we captured through the workflow. So it's going to give us the same image that was captured. And if I look at the history, it's going to see all of the data that was captured through that workflow and timestamps and user accounts tied to it. So everyone will know that Justin Mills staged that material at 3:23 p.m. and provided this information. And then at the time, it captured a GPS location of Atlanta where I took that video and performed the work. So that's the downstream side. And from there, it would be shipped to site, and someone would eventually start a receiving process based on that material. So let me flip back to my presentation here. And wanted to, now seeing that, we saw it in slide form with screenshots and saw 2 videos of what I called a comprehensive workflow. Brad, I wanted to ask, how do you see that applying across different suppliers? Like how would they leverage the configuration of that workflow?
Well, it depends on, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, the type of materials that you're going to tag. So we would be able to narrow down exactly what that supplier needs to do in their workflow, whether it is from something that is electrical components like we talked about in little bags, putting barcodes on them, all the way up to tagging unique valves where we might have bulk valves. We want to capture each one of those valves with an RFID tag, and maybe they have specific serial numbers that we want to capture on those valves. Again, maybe heat numbers, but all that different type of information that either you need to convey to the guys on site that they're receiving, because they're going to be doing maybe some inspections on site, and then just the configuration so that the supplier specifically has that.
Yeah, let's dive in deeper to each of those different suppliers. We saw the breadth of that workflow and the different blocks. What type of blocks or flow would you expect for a pipe spool fabricator?
Pipe spool fabricator would be fairly easy. We would have, you've got unique tagged items, and I'm going to assume that they're engineered and tagged. So we would only use, if they're small bore, I would bring up the app and you would look up through your PO item that you have, pull that up, find it. If maybe we had imported those barcodes, usually with the higher end suppliers like that are doing tagged items that are specific one place location in the plant. They've got a pretty good tracking system on their own, so we'll import their barcode, open the app. I don't even have to look it up now. I can just scan the barcode, put this tag on that small 2.5-inch pipe spool, strap it on however you want to do it, either with the zip ties, maybe it's crated on the side. You'd scan it and then associate it in the system. That's it. Pretty simple.
So very simple. So we're going to tie that back to the blocks. They'd look at the purchase order information, identify the PO line. From there, they would verify quantity of one, status and location, and then, and do that. I skipped over just being able to scan for it.
Yeah, you said look for the PO item, and I was,
Yeah.
you're not looking for the PO item this one because we've got the barcodes in there.
Yeah, that's right. So you scan to identify it. They'd present the quantity, the status, the location, and then the next block would be RFID, and then be done.
That's right.
So,
Or maybe you want a picture because it is a tagged spool,
Sure.
and you want somebody to be able to easily identify it when they're receiving it on a kicking count. I mean, that makes it really easy. The guys that are receiving usually aren't involved in the engineering. They just know what's on the paper. So now you have a picture.
and that's good. And if for one supplier or one pipe fabricator, you wanted a picture because maybe they're a third party and you had an in-house pipe fabricator where you didn't need one, you could have two different workflows in the system for two different pipe fabricators, one with a picture, one without.
Yep. Yeah, that's great.
Yep. So let's take it to a different direction. Maybe how would this work, or how would you build a workflow for a mechanical valve manufacturer or supplier?
So for mechanical valves, I definitely want more information, as we've talked about the serial numbers. For mechanical valves, I would probably use passive RFID tags because they're a little bit smaller, easier. There's not you're going to have a bunch of them in boxes separated, so it's easier to put those in there. I would have a workflow built so that they first would associate the RFID tags. Let's assume that we don't have the barcodes. So they look up their purchase order item, either their number or maybe a description. They could type it in and try to search through multiple fields. They would associate the RFID tag. And since I'm putting these in crates, let's say we're going to put 20 to a crate, 5-inch. I would put all of them physically in the crate. They've got your passive RFID tags on each one of those. And then I would close the crate and I would put an RFID tag on the outside of that because I've digitally put those in a container. And now I associate that RFID tag on the outside of that container or the crate to a container digitally. And now when the guys receive them at site, all they have to do is walk up, scan that RFID tag or the barcode on the RFID tag right there, and they automatically see what's inside that crate.
Got it. So some differences from the pipe fabricator, you want to capture serial number by valve. And then the biggest difference is probably how they're packaging it and containerizing it. So adding in the blocks for containers. And then with that container, it can have an RFID tag that understands its contents, like the materials that are inside of it. So good to, I guess, carry this forward to another supplier type. We talked about pipe spool fabricators and mechanical valves. Let's take it to some more basic components, maybe electrical bulks. How do you see that shaping up as a workflow?
Depending on that, so we've worked with several large electrical suppliers, some out of the UK that we're very familiar with, and they have a lot of small components that go into bags, and then those bags are different sizes, and then they go into one cardboard box, and then the cardboard box is packaged up and it's put in a crate, and then the crate's put in a sea can, right? So I would set it up so that they could barcode those small bags. Not a lot of expense with barcode. It's easy to do, easy identified. So you open up the mobile application, you look for your PO item the same way. We don't have their barcodes because they're small items. I find it, I go through the workflow of printing out the barcode label. Now I've got a barcode label on that plastic bag that has grommets in it, small pieces and parts for electrical connections. And then I'll have a bunch of those, all do the same thing, put those in a cardboard box. Now physically put them in the cardboard box on my app too. I've got a container. It's going to be, I chose the type that's a cardboard box. Now it's identified as a cardboard box. Barcode on the outside of that, because I really don't need to track that location. Barcode, just easy identification. And then continue upstream and do that until I'm in my last container. Again, when you get to site, you scan the outside of the biggest container you see, and you get all the containers that are inside of it. That's when the site sees that, suppliers see that, the flow of information back and forth of things that are done right, things that are done wrong. It's awesome seeing the things that, maybe it's not done wrong. 3PL had to split shipments in process, but Jovix is configurable, flexible enough to be able to make some adjustments when you get to site. What you're doing is you're scanning physically what's there. And so you get, those kind of suppliers where you have those bulk items. It gives you the ability to detail down into what you really need to know when you receive them on site.
Yeah, and my big takeaways and differences from the other examples are that you don't necessarily need an RFID tag.
That's right.
You still get value out of engaging suppliers with just barcodes. And really the nesting of containers and how you're packing those materials. So you mentioned bags within cardboard boxes, within crates, within larger crates, and building that structure and being able to just scan the highest parent or the largest container and knowing its content. So
yeah.
I think those are three great examples of how you can set it up differently across different suppliers. So some takeaways. Supplier engagement is important for a lot of reasons. Primarily, it really enables the digital supply chain.
That's right.
You got to start up front, align on your data, and why not attach some form of auto ID at that point so you can leverage it throughout the entire process. We've come up with an onboarding process to make that happen with our suppliers. So how do we communicate with them? How do we train them? And then how do they use the software and the hardware to make it a reality?
And most people will ask, what's the secret to engaging suppliers? Because frankly, we've worked with the largest companies in the industry, and they have the same question. And it's really just persistence, like us being persistent with the message to the suppliers. It is actually something that's very exhilarating when you're working with a foreign-speaking supplier and you make this work. It is amazing, whether it's Chinese suppliers, it's Korean suppliers, it's South American suppliers. I mean, a language barrier you would think would be difficult, but it's not, just because the software is so easy to use.
Good to hear. So we have that connection.
Yeah.
We have the suppliers in the system and the data, and it's ultimately driving decisions downstream for construction. That's why we're doing it, so that we can keep time on tools, make sure that the guys out in the field are productive. So with that, kind of next steps, you might be wondering how you get this on your project. If you're already engaged and have Jovix on your project, but don't have your suppliers engaged and really in there, or if you're potentially a new client and joining us for the first time today, we've got a proven process on how we scope and deliver this technology. And we call it a material readiness assessment, and it's going through and understanding your specific project, your data needs, your geographic needs, different suppliers, the types of auto IDs, and putting that together. And on the scope side, we build a geoscape. We go out and try to understand all the different points in your supply chain, where we need to apply and leverage auto ID and deploy the software. We tie that together with a process flow and data management plan to make sure we're getting all the information we need and have the right transactions in place. And then, like you said earlier, we look at the best use of our hardware, whether it's consumer devices, ruggedized tablets, drone readers, vehicle readers, gate readers. Work with you to decide what's best for your project. And then that all rolls up into something you're very familiar with, our implementation plans and schedules. So that really makes it a reality. It's nice to talk about it and scope it, but those plans are what drive the implementation of the value. And then we also look at a business case. So we've done this enough where we know that it improves the construction process. And we try to capture the value that we're providing with this process and these technologies to help demonstrate the improvements on your project.
Yeah, and being able to get on site early, and this is part of the MRA that we really would like to do, is talk to some of the guys there. And we know that early on in a project, you're not going to have everyone on site.
Sure.
But you got the leadership there that's going to talk about that. And so getting in early, discussing their process that they have in place, understanding what they plan on doing, really gives us a chance to look at their efficiencies. Because like you said, we've done this enough to where we've got the experience of seeing this on multiple projects and being able to see what works, what doesn't work. But knowing that status quo process very early on is very important to showing the advantages that you're receiving by using Jovix.
Well, great. If there are any questions or inquiries into the MRA process or the content we covered today, my email is listed here. Please feel free to reach out and ask. But thank you for joining and watching. We really appreciate it.
Thanks.